On any given day, the Xeno Contact Committee was informed of the whereabouts, actions, and mistakes of over 12 million humans that were currently wandering around the galaxy. A low percentage of the actual population out there, but notes were kept, actions taken. What they really didn't like was a question mark. Dead, retired, rescued were acceptable, but not an unfinished report, not a lingering doubt about some new enemy or an unexpected idiot. If it made it to the director, then someone somewhere in the system was deliberately putting it on his desk. The AIs that served his office were a multitude, legion in fact, but for the most part, it was a chance to learn about the galaxy before they took their place on a diplomatic orbital or in the AI Defense Force. The director reread the report. It didn't take long. He looked up. Why can I end up reading a 50-page report on catnip exports and all you can give me about this is 20 lines telling me we know nothing? Where is our missing engineer? It's not a complicated question. The avatar recognized the tone. Sometimes the human would pick at a problem like a stray thread. It surprised him how often that unraveled something that actually needed attention. Sir, we have people on the way. My department is intel mapping the sector as I speak. Until that turns up something, we have nowhere to look. The galaxy is just too damn big. Alice entered the shuttle and threw an engineer's eye over it. Mid-range, big budget, and non-standard. Not ideal. A shove to the back sent her into one of the seats. She glared at the lizard person responsible and growled, "That was just rude. May your egg shrivel and your scales fall off, asshole." The trooper seemed genuinely upset at her curse, keening into its translator, some third-party piece of shit. Unfortunate consequences of superior demands, no personal animosity, please retract, threat, prophecy. Alice worked that one out. Fine, she didn't need the added grief. Courtesy offered, threat, prophecy withdrawn, civility expected. She thought it sounded like a haiku, but it seemed to work as the Xeno bowed gratefully and withdrew. As the old lizard had told her before going into whatever personal hell he was facing, she was valuable to these creatures. She wasn't entirely sure if the trooper spread the word or if the orders changed, but very quickly her captors were much nicer to her. She used the opportunity to steal every small object she could fit in her boots. Her odd metal belt was beginning to chafe. The priest captain chose that moment to arrive and gloat. "Well, human, you see that we have survived without your people, without your meddling. Your survival depends on the hive now. Your spurious individualism leaves you alone with us. Unknown, unrecoverable, unnecessary to your own." Alice ran that through her mind. "So you're a swarm species? Not that many of them still around." She paused. "Oh wait, that's because you tried to kill us and we crushed you. I remember reading about in an ancient history class. Didn't you all just adapt and evolve? Most of your people just have fond memories of their brood mother and a lot of immediate family." The priest growled at her. "Some chose to fall, but we remain, silent and pure. We chose to leave the galaxy to you mutants and the broken and guard our home against your poisonous nanotech." Alice could tell this was such a poor excuse that even the priest couldn't bring himself to believe it, so she had to add, "So you're hiding?" Apparently, the priest wasn't from one of those non-violent churches, since his response was to lash out, his fist slamming into the side of her head. Alice fell back in surprise. "Ow! My ear!" The rage that she had been feeling boiled up and she returned the blow. It had never occurred to the priest that someone might hit back, so he didn't step out of the way and ended up flat on the deck with Alice standing over him, fists clenched. "Try that again, you fucking weirdo, and I'll start kicking." The troopers around her started keening and were obviously upset but reluctant to interfere. She scowled at them. "And you lot can sit down as well." One of the creatures stuttered. "We are forbidden from interfering with priests. Conflict of superior orders. Violence over? Please?" Courtesy offered. It had the pleading tone of any crewman stuck between conflicting orders. Alice sniffed. Violence offered. Violence returned. She looked at the unconscious priest and nodded. Violence over. In a moment of inspiration, she hauled the priest onto its seat and pulled out the manacles that had been getting increasingly uncomfortable and happily chained him in place. The crew was baffled, but made no effort to stop her. She sat down as peaceably as she could, smiled at them. Violence restrained. The priest regained consciousness and realized he was chained in place. The furious barks and whistles from him began to grate, so Alice leaned in. "Because you're an idiot, you seem to have taught the crew that I'm also a priest. They won't interfere as long as I don't do anything too weird to you. If you try and take off the chains, I'll kick you so hard in the head that you can have a personal meeting with your god. Am I clear? Now sit quietly until we get to whatever the next part of this shit show is. This ship can't travel very far, so I imagine it won't be too long." The rest of the flight passed in awkward and sullen silence. The Cardinal awaited the scout ship, aware that somehow the human had twisted his ambitious priest into an incoherent rage. His queen whispered in his ear to heed the warning, and he took her counsel. He sniffed at the cold ship air and pulled his ceremonial clothes tighter, a swift glance ensuring his honor guard was ready. They watched the ship land, weapons ready. Alice felt the landing and sensed the confusion among the guards, with mutterings and quick glances towards the sullen priest. "Fine. Let's see how far this rolled." She stood and brushed down her clothes. "Attention!" She saw them stumble and fumble for their weapons. "I assume I am here to meet your superiors. I expect you to show some discipline. Your captain will escort me and ensure we do not have a repeat of the appalling conduct that I have endured. The rest of you will form an honor guard, and I expect you to be ready as soon as the door opens." The soldiers looked at one of their kind and received a curt nod. The one that seemed to be in charge stared at her and ostentatiously checked his sidearm before giving a small bow. If she read the species' face properly, he had been grinning. She returned the nod and pushed the fear down deeper, holding herself ready for anything. The Cardinal watched as the guards he had sent to capture the human marched in formation from the ship and formed an honor guard. "What?" escaped his lips before he froze his tail ends. The human marched down the ramp stiff as one of their famous avatars and showing him nothing. He could imagine the rage building up in the creature. Then it surprised him, reaching the end of the honor guard and turning to them to speak. Alice turned to the guards, misbegotten bastards that they were, honorable enough in their way, and spoke as clearly as she could. Courtesy offered, respect given. Prosper and be well. She raised her hand in the engineer's salute, a sort of vague wave to the eyebrow, and turned to meet the new enemy. The guards slipped their weapons in some sort of display and visibly relaxed. The human was some else's problem now. The one dressed in purple warbled something at the guard captain and received an answer. The purple one seemed irritated and growled out something short. The guard went back into the ship. Alice figured that this was the bit where she was fucked, although no one seemed to be watching her right now. The priest was dragged from the ship still wearing the manacles she had put on him and grunting and obviously complaining. The purple one cut him off with a command and nodded to the guard. Apparently, he reactivated the translators, or the ship updated them, but Alice could now understand as the purple one growled again. The Cardinal absorbed the report from the guard. The human had shown some small skill at diplomacy and an irritating awareness of its value. His priest had endangered a mission that had already cost him 2 ships and 50 men with his arrogance. The hive made its verdict clear. The Queen agreed. He quoted the human as he passed sentence. "Violence offered, violence received." He nodded at the guard captain. Alice heard the words and then saw her captors raise their weapons and shoot the annoying priest into a bloody mess on the deck of the ship. She pushed her feelings down, afraid to add vomit to the mix. Who the fuck were these people?